Good evening, everyone. How are you? This is Enrique Sanchez, founder and director of Spanish United Podcast. Tonight, we have a very special guest. Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
My name is David Milton, judge of the Los Angeles Superior Court. I left that court in 2014. I'm now working as a private judge in private practice, handling arbitrations, mediations, and complex discovery matters. And I'm a candidate for district attorney for Los Angeles County.
Awesome. Welcome for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Likewise, as we had met last Thursday, I was very interested in your panel discussion with Mr. Gascon, and I believe you're one of the few Republicans that's running as DA candidate. Am I correct, sir?
Well, actually, I'm the only Republican running. There were two long-term Republicans uh, that's Mr. Hockman, Nathan Hockman, and Jonathan Atami, who have switched their votes. Pardon me, their registration to, well, Mr. Hockman has switched to no party preference, and that was very recent.
Mhm.
And Mr. Atami, a couple of years ago, switched to Democrat. And I think both of those were for the purpose of attempting to take advantage of the rich Democrat pool of voters in Los Angeles County. And
Mhm.
I just don't do that. I want to be very transparent with the voters, and there's nothing extreme about me. I'm a registered Republican since 1988, and I'm not extreme. I'm a common sense person, fair-minded. So that's why I'm about, and I will not switch party registration for the purpose of attempting to get more Democrats to support me.
Mhm. I commend you because not too many politicians do that. They switch parties depending on what's just their own interest. So I commend you for keeping over with your beliefs. So
Thank
one of the
you.
things that we're going to be discussing on is the issue of public safety. We want to know, what would you do differently in the city of Los Angeles? Because as you know, we're going through a very strong crime wave in the city, smash and grabs. People are not being arrested, especially when the law says that if you steal less than $950, you won't be prosecuted. So it's becoming really chaotic. So like, what would you do differently when it comes to prosecuting criminals?
Well, it's just enforcing the law. I think Mr. Gascon, I think, frankly, he's on his way out. And I think that's why you have a number of candidates challenging Mr. Gascon. It's just his policy. This Prop 47, it, uh, it changed the law with respect to using prior convictions against a person who's a present perpetrator. In the past, if you committed a theft and you had a prior conviction for theft, it could be charged as a felony.
Mm,
And Prop 47 eliminated that possibility. Also, Proposition 47 put a jurisdictional amount of $950, meaning if the theft was less than $950, it could be charged as a misdemeanor. But that's not the real analysis. And let me explain that. Prop 47, the penal code in California indicates that if you enter into any establishment, whether it's a residence or a commercial establishment, and you have the intent to steal at the time of your entry, well, that's a burglary. And
mhm,
if you use force or fear on the occupants, that's a robbery. These are serious felonies. Now,
mhm,
think about this, how the smash and grab, the flash mob theft events typically happen. You have people, a number of people go in and they're prepared when they go in. They have hammers and crowbars and those types of things, and they smash the jewelry cases of proprietors. Well, clearly they planned that before they entered. And so the amount of the theft isn't necessarily that important. And so, under that scenario that I just described, smashing and scaring the occupants, that's a robbery, a felony,
mhm,
and they ought to be prosecuted and charged with robbery. That's not what happens under Mr. Gascon's administration. He's ordered the deputies not to file felonies, and they're filing misdemeanors. And those just don't fit what's occurring. And these mom and pop stores and even the freestanding stores like Target
Mhm.
and just the other freestanding stores, they are victims. And now that it's spread to large shopping malls and people are afraid and they ought to be properly charged. And I think if they were properly charged, if you had a district attorney who's in that office following the law, that use of force or fear and during a theft and entering with the intent to steal, you're going to be charged with robbery, it would stop. It's just a matter of enforcing the law. And I think Mr. Gascon just uses some of the language and provisions of Prop 47 to justify charging misdemeanors and not petty theft. So, I mean, not burglary or robbery.
Mhm.
So
S-
that's what we're looking at. I mean, that's just the anyone, even I
Right.
think Mr. Gascon would have to admit that penal code sections at 459 and 211, they particularly describe burglary and robbery. And if you were to
Mhm.
charge them, these things would stop.
Right. Yeah, because I remember a couple years ago, you didn't see these types of crimes. Like I was at Target today at the Glendale Galleria, and I was looking for underwear, and they have underwear under in a glass case. The first time I've ever seen that in my life, and because I could understand like people stealing jewelry, but it's like, who would steal underwear?
Yes, right. I mean, many items, just the common items that people use every day. I mean, they're under lock and key now. A can of shaving cream, shaving razor, so just miscellaneous things. Toiletries, they're under lock and key, and it should not be the case.
No, of course not.
That's a product of not enforcing. Pardon me, not enforcing the law. That's what it is.
So why do you think Mr. Gascon is not enforcing it? Because he feels that by being lenient on the criminals that they'll reform themselves? It's like I don't see the idea of not prosecuting people that are doing these types of crimes.
Yeah, I don't believe that at all, and I think a lot of the other candidates. I'm certain of this. They look at this as well, let's just go in there and charge appropriate crimes, robbery and burglary under these circumstances, and the problem goes away. But that's not the full analysis. I look at it more globally than that. And here's why. There is an individual, I'm sure you're aware of the billionaire, what's his name?
George Soros?
George Soros. Yeah, I don't know why I had a lapse on his name, but George Soros. Think of what's occurring in the entire country. Mr. Soros has backed all the many soft on crime DAs, I call them soft on crime DAs in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Philadelphia.
Baltimore.
These people have received large financial backing by Mr. Soros. Now, why is this happening and what are they doing? Each of those DAs in these major cities in this country are doing effectively doing what Mr. Gascon has been doing, soft on crime, releasing people from prison and not sending people who belong in prison to prison. So why are they doing that? It's a pattern across this country. And if you look at this, it's a movement. If you look at open borders, where so many people in this country are entering this country illegally, millions of people are entering this country illegally. Some or many of them mean us harm.
Mhm.
And so you have the open borders coupled with releasing people who are dangerous from prisons, coupled with the demand to defund police officers and a movement to remove the ability to protect yourself from get rid of your firearms. So what does this look like? What's this picture leading to? If you've gotten rid of the police departments, you can't defend yourself adequately. You're releasing dangerous people from prisons, and you've got an open border where many people entering the country want to hurt us.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? Right? This is a national movement. This is, and the other candidates in this office just kind of look at it more microscopically
Mhm.
and say, well, we can solve this just by reversing the Gascon policies. I see it's more than that. I think we definitely need to stop this in LA County, which I would do if I'm
Mhm.
fortunate to become the district attorney. I will enforce the law as it should be enforced.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
I see
yeah,
broader
go ahead.
national movement is what I see. I see this thing is much broader than what is just occurring in Los Angeles County.
Hmm. Yeah, because I just feel that, when the laws are not being enforced, it kind of sends the message that it doesn't matter what you do, it's like you're not going to is not going to be punished. And from how I see it, from my point of view, is that when you live in a civil society, where there is the rule of law, government's not perfect. Government, can make mistakes, because they're human. But
Yes, of
there
course.
are certain principles that every civilized democratic society has, that if one commits a crime, one has to be punished. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to get the death penalty for, let's say, stealing an ice cream bar, like in some
Right.
cases, like in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
But there needs to be consequences, but at the same time there needs to be focus also on rehabilitation. Spanish United, we believe in empowering Hispanic people, in particularly to lead more productive lives. And one of the things that I noticed in the panel discussion was that there really wasn't much emphasis on the Hispanics that are incarcerated. There was more emphasis on the African Americans that are incarcerated, but not so much emphasis on the Hispanic people that are incarcerated, which many of them have fallen into cracks, primarily because many of them don't speak English or they lack the resources. And
Yes.
that's a concern that I have, especially with many that, like you were saying, are coming across the border that we don't know who they are. And it further fuels Hispanophobia and xenophobia towards Hispanic people that are honest, working, productive citizens.
Well, as you're saying, there are more non-Hispanics coming across the border recently.
Mm.
They're coming from Europe and other countries, Africa, other countries, in Middle East, and um, my wife is Chinese, and she is persuaded that many of these people entering the country now, she's from mainland, and she's persuaded that many of these people who are dressed in civilian clothing are trained soldiers, and they're coming
Mm.
here to do us harm eventually.
PLA, People's Liberation Army.
What's that?
No, I said the People's Liberation Army. That's the armed forces of the People's Republic of China. They're called the PLA, the
Yeah,
People's
yeah,
Liberation Army.
yeah, or the CCP. They just commonly refer to them CCP. It's just one branch or subset of the CCP.
Yes, because
Chinese
because I noticed that in the San Gabriel Valley, there are clandestine overseas police stations that are operating there, and many of
Sure.
them are probably coming from the border that are in civilian clothing.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like Americans are asleep at the wheel, quite frankly.
Mm.
That's my view. They're just not being vigilant enough to and circumspect to be even concerned about what's going on.
Oh,
That's one of
I
the
agree
reasons.
with you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said I do agree with you. Many Americans are not aware of what's happening because they're preoccupied with other things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So another question I wanted to ask you, Judge, in terms of and enforcing the law, if you were to become district attorney, like right now there is an issue of many Hispanic gang members that are being massively incarcerated. So, unfortunately, this has become a trend, that many of the criminals today are being incarcerated are predominantly his Hispanic. So if you were to be district attorney, like what would you do differently to either minimize or to try to keep the more dangerous criminals in prison, and other ways of probably rehabilitating people that are still criminals, but they're not violent offenders. So it's like, that's my question to you.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned in some of these panel discussions, I was raised in a Judeo-Christian family, and I have those values with me today. I was forced to go to church 3 or 4 times a week. I didn't
Mhm.
want to go, but I did. But I'm that has made me a person who's fair-minded and strong values. And again, I grew up in Indiana, even though I was born in Pasadena. My parents moved to Indiana when I was an infant, And I spent the first 20 years of my life there. And you have to think about, well, you weren't born at the time, but
Mm.
in the 60s and 70s in Indiana, our country was very racially tense.
Right.
And so I experienced a lot of those indignities that just happened in the country during that time, especially in that part of the country.
Mm.
And so, but the combination of those experiences have made me a strong person. But it's made me sensitive to injustices. And so I'm mindful of things like that. And so number one on my platform is hate crimes. And but I'm vigilant. And if I were the district attorney, I mean, as a deputy district attorney, I filed charges all the time. I was in the hardcore gang division, the career criminal division, and so I filed many of my own cases and I had a lot of autonomy, but I'm mindful of things like that. There's no way in the world that I'm going to allow someone to be suffer some kind of detriment because of their ethnicity. That is just wrong. It's dead wrong.
Mm.
As a DA, I would never, ever get involved in anything. I mean, detectives bring us cases. If you're in the DA's office, the deputy DA evaluates that case and it makes a determination of what charges can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. If you can prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, you file it, and if you can't prove it based on looking at the defenses and everything, and you can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt as your conclusion, you don't file. It has
Exactly.
absolutely nothing to do with someone's ethnicity. I would not I would not tolerate that for the district. So if it were ever brought to my attention that someone's law enforcement agency or any deputies in the office were disadvantaging anyone based on their ethnicity or religion or gender or anything like that, any of those classifications, it would not happen. They'd have to answer to me for that.
Because a couple of years ago, there was a case where an individual had a very bad luck, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to get a representation, and he was basically convicted. He didn't go to jail, but he'd had to plead a no contest because he didn't have the means to either post bail or he didn't get due process. But I feel that the um, the district attorney's office, or let's say the city attorney's office for that matter, is very politicized. It's like it's supposed to be based on merit, like you were saying, like if there is no evidence that someone committed a crime, because the way the law says in the books, we are innocent before proven guilty, and if there is no physical evidence to convict someone, you can't convict someone. But from what I'm seeing, that many people are being convicted based either by what they look like or by the economic status. That is a problem that's affecting a lot of people, particularly Hispanic people in particular. So I would like to see that reverse, because many Hispanic people, unfortunately, because of their ethnicity and their economic circumstances, many of them are forced to take plea deals because they can't either hire an attorney or they have a public defender that doesn't really do their job right.
Well, a lot of people have that conception of the public defender, but let me kind of elucidate on that, at least if I can.
Be my guest.
My experiences when I was in the deputy DA, on a daily basis, I would see the same public defender or public defenders in the same courtroom. We were all the young lawyers or lawyers that had a few years of experience, whatever the case might be, and it depended on the seriousness of the case, from misdemeanors all the way up to felonies. Well, there was a camaraderie between the deputy DAs and the deputy public defenders, and these were people who were hardworking. The deputy public defenders, I don't know why they get such a bad rap, but these are hardworking lawyers, and they fight tooth and nail for their clients. And we would slug it out in those courtrooms in front of juries, from the misdemeanor handlings all the way up to the felony handlings. I mean, it's a serious business. These public defenders aren't doing a disservice. As a matter of fact, I've seen deputy public defenders get better results than the private lawyer who comes in there and he's paid the big buck and he's not around on a regular basis and he loses a case. And the deputy public defender who knows the DAs and knows the courtrooms, knows the judges, knows the motions to file, the clients are getting a good service and they work well together. And I that's not a bad legal counsel to have. I mean, I know some deputy public defenders are getting a bad rap, in my view,
Mhm.
but these guys work hard. They work hard. They have pride in the handling of their cases. They file the appropriate motions. They try all they can to get the case dismissed, and that's their role. Everybody's entitled to have legal representation, and no one should be there saying, well, I don't have a lawyer, so therefore I'm going to plead no contest to something that I didn't, a crime that I didn't
Mhm.
commit. No
Because
one wants that result.
right, no, of course not. No, the reason why I bring it up because recently they eliminated the cash bail where people can be released on their own cognizance. But back in 2016, where this individual had this particular case, uh, he was not, he wanted to plead not guilty and go to trial, but
Mhm.
because
Well, were we talking about misdemeanor or felony?
no, this was a misdemeanor.
Okay, misdemeanors usually, in my view, both as a DA and as a trial judge in the criminal assignment, um, on low level offenses where there's no real risk to society, certain levels of crimes are low level crimes. I never really objected to an OR release under circumstances like that, unless the person had prior failures to
Right.
appear or he posed some kind of a risk. I had no problem with him waiting at home until a trial date. I mean, there's no reason in cases like that to insist on bail. And so I think, well, that's what a lot of the prosecutors think. That's what a lot of judges believe. And that's what I'd look at, they'd bring their client in before me when I was a judge.
Mhm.
And I just look at those factors. I let the public defender articulate why his client should be released on OR right now. He's been he's been a citizen in the county for a number of years. He's got a good job, and he lives here for so many years, and he
Mhm.
doesn't have any prior history or failures to appear. And judge will release him OR, and I said, "All right, Deputy DA, tell me why he ought to remain in custody." And the DA better come up for good, substantial reasons why that person ought to. And most of those people are released OR.
Mhm. Well, I definitely agree that there needs to be restorative justice because again, and this is my opinion, for someone that works in civil rights and advocacy, like I see many people because especially if they don't know the law and they don't know how the law works, many of them have been
But that
coerced
deputy
into
public
taking a
defender
deal.
explained to him the law and how it works, a good representation, and explain his rights and what he ought to do. I think in the past, I think there are too many restrictions. I'm just addressing low level offenders who really pose no risk and looks like it's likely that they're going to return and not fail to appear. The value of having a cash bail system or any bail at all, whether you post bond or cash or whatever the means might be, uh, that kind of ensures that the person will return for further court
Mhm.
hearings. And if you
Mhm.
don't, then some bond agent's out there looking for you to bring you back. So
Right.
that's the benefit of having a bond. And I'd like, it'd be interesting for me to see, since the no cash bail policy was implemented, how many failures to appear have they increased since that change in policy or not? I don't know. I left the criminal practice some years ago.
Mhm.
When I was a Superior Court judge, I think I left probably the criminal practice in 2004 or five, somewhere around there, and went into civil practice. So um, I'm not sure whether there are any studies been conducted to determine, since the no cash bail policy has been implemented, whether that's resulted in more failures to appear and warrants being issued. So that's one of the main concerns. But I think most judges today think, well, why are we going to keep these crowded jail conditions when these low level offenders can be at home waiting trial, even if they had an electronic monitoring bracelet or something?
Mhm. Yeah, because I just feel that many people that are in the system, many of them in many cases don't even know why they're being charged. Like this individual that I'm talking about, he didn't even know why he was being charged. Like he even showed me a letter that he got a criminal complaint was being filed against him, but he didn't even know why or what it was. And when he got there, it's like he even know why he was there. It was kind of strange because they passed like some weird laws in 2016 and had to do with cyber stalking or whatever. But again, it was kind
Yeah.
of vague because it's like it didn't say what he was being charged with. It just said
Well,
that he was being charged with
familiar with that
something.
letter. I'm familiar with that letter, and that letter specifically states the charge and gives you the opportunity to appear. And that's usually low-level offenses. This
Hmm.
is your charge, what we're looking at. You better appear on a certain date. If you don't, well, then we're going to issue a warrant for your arrest. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the substance of the letter. I cannot imagine the letter omitting what what the charge is. So sometimes the people who are accused and have stories to tell, they kind of embellish a little bit on what they knew or didn't know.
Right, of course. Well, like I said, the good thing for him is that he didn't go to jail, but it was a hectic for him. I actually had to help him get expungement, and because again, he didn't know the law or whatever. It was just a bad
Yeah,
situation. So that's
yeah,
where I come in. I try to help Hispanic people that have been, disenfranchised by the establishment to try to be more productive citizens. Because again, if one doesn't know the law, it's like going into a concrete jungle. So I
yeah.
I really feel
I,
it's very needed that Hispanics in general know their rights, their legal rights, that is.
yeah, yeah, I agree. But that's the lawyer's job. And like I said, usually those deputy public defenders are good at that, informing their clients what their rights are, and they're prepared to go to bat for them in a jury trial in a heartbeat. So more than a lot of these paid defense counsel who are taking the bucks and not necessarily performing the service they ought to be performing.
So
I mean, that's a
another
pretty broad,
right,
broad brush, stroke that to
right.
say that, but I've seen that in many instances where the lawyers, the paid lawyers, are taking the money and aren't. Yeah, I got somebody in my class. I can't appear on that date and all those kinds of things, and they should don't show up to court, and the judge is upset. And the judge says you better be at a certain. Well, okay, judge, can we continue to the next day? Well, your client's in prison, in jail, right? Those kinds of things. That deputy public defender is there on a regular basis, just like the deputy DA is. They're working hand to hand every day on these cases.
Right,
I think the
absolutely.
public ought to be disabused of the notion that because they've got a public defender, they're not getting the good quality legal service. I don't agree with that at all. I had
Mhm.
that experience for years when I was a prosecutor and as a judge.
Mhm. Maybe in this individual's case, maybe the public defender didn't explain to him anything, and maybe that's the reason why he didn't get a good deal. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like it worked out in the end. He got it expunged, and that's an important
Right,
thing. It's an unpleasant experience to go through, but bottom line, he got it expunged and he had to serving jail time. Those are good things.
right, absolutely. And another question I was going to ask you, in terms of public safety, like, once if you are elected as DA, like would there be like reforms within the district attorney's office? Like would people be removed? Would you bring people in that are more efficient in their job? It's like, how does that work? Because supposedly the DA's office is apolitical. It's not a political institution. And let's say like the
Shouldn't
government.
be,
Yeah, so
shouldn't
it's
be.
like,
Yeah.
how would that work if you were to become DA, like in terms of bringing in new people in?
Well, Mr. Gascon, in my view, and his executive staff, it seems to me that they would have to be, well, Gascon would leave because he would, if he fails to get reelected, but his staff, you would expect the staff to go along with him if they're not civil servant people,
Hmm.
service people, but they've got to be able to comply with the current administration's policies. And Mr. Gascon's policies are just wrong. I mean, he says, well, he's usurped the function of the legislature and the judiciary as well. And what I mean by that, the legislature said, here's a certain crime or here's an enhancement. And if they can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt under the California Constitution and the government code, those enhancements ought to be filed. Well, if he just says, well, I don't like them, they give you too much time. So I'm not going to follow that law. Well, he's usurped the function of the legislature. And if he's refusing to let these things even go to the judiciary to be heard and tried, well, he's usurped the function of the judiciary as well. There's just one man who's made that decision. Say, I don't care what the law is, I'm not going to follow it.
Isn't
Well,
that isn't
I'm
that
I'm
is
duty bound to follow the law. I will follow the law.
So isn't that illegal, or is it just that he's not following what the Constitution says of the state?
Well, he won't, he ignores a lot of the legislation and he refused to let those things get adjudicated by the courts. It's the
Mm,
court's function to make a determination whether the crime in fact has been committed, whether that's a jury trial or a bench trial. That's a
mm,
judicial function.
I
Okay?
see.
If there's a crime by the legislature, it's the executive branch that's supposed to execute those laws, bring them to the court, push them forward. It's a 1, 2, 3. You got the legislative branch, so here's a law. If there's a violation, send it to the district attorney, the executive branch. All right. The executive branch files the appropriate charge and moves to the judicial branch for determination. And Gascon refuses to do that.
I see. Well, we have come to the end of our time. I want to tell you, Judge, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for answering our questions. And for your listeners on your side, Spanish United is available on all media platforms. We are on Spanish United YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, now known as X, Instagram, and anyone that wants to donate to Spanish United, we're willing to take donations. I wish you success on your campaign, and I hope that you have a wonderful evening.
Well, thank you for inviting me to participate in your podcast, Mr.
Like
Sanchez.
likewise, Judge. Have yourself
Hey,
a
thank
wonderful
you.
evening.
You have the same. Thank you.
Take
Bye
care now.
now.
God
You
bless.
too.
Bye bye.